Okay, so let's talk about the biggest question there is, right? What happens when we die? It's something humans have wondered about forever. But today, we're going to try to set aside belief, set aside speculation, and just look at the hard evidence. We're going to dive into the work compiled by the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies and really explore their case for what they call the strongest evidence for life after death.
So this question, it wasn't just some philosopher asking it. This was put to the world by aerospace billionaire Robert T. Bigelow. And he didn't just, think about it over coffee. He put his money where his mouth is. He launched a massive global competition, offering huge prize money for the best scientific evidence that could finally answer this. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some abstract intellectual game for him. This was deeply, deeply personal. Bigelow's whole search was driven by immense personal tragedy. He lost both his son and his wife. So he wasn't looking for comforting fables or feel-good stories. He wanted cold, hard, scientific proof.
All right, so let's dive into the first big pillar of evidence, near-death experiences, or NDEs. You've probably heard of them, right? Well, these stories from the very edge of death, they don't just challenge our ideas about the mind, they kind of blow them up.
The standard view, what most of us are taught, is that your brain makes you, you. It creates your consciousness. But what if that's backward? Researchers like Dr. Pim van Lommel are saying, hold on a minute. The evidence, they argue, suggests the brain might be more like a radio. It's not creating the music, it's just picking up a broadcast that's already out there.
And this is where it gets really wild. We're talking about verifiable stuff. People whose hearts have stopped, their brains are totally offline, no activity, nothing. They shouldn't be able to form a single memory. Yet they wake up and can tell you word for word what the doctors were saying, or describe the instruments they used, or even see things happening down the hall. This isn't a dream. It's being reported as real, observable events.
Okay, so if consciousness can exist without the brain firing, what else is possible? Well, our next pillar of evidence takes that idea even further. We're now getting into the very controversial but incredibly well-documented world of children who remember past lives. And for a lot of people, this is where the evidence gets just unbelievably strange.
And this isn't just one or two anecdotes. We're talking over 2,500 documented cases from researchers like Dr. Jim Tucker. And get this, it's usually little kids, like 2, 3 years old. They just start talking about being someone else, remembering specific names, towns, even how they died. Details there's just no way they could possibly know.
But it's not just memories. Sometimes there's physical proof. Actual physical marks on their bodies. In the most compelling cases, children have birthmarks that line up perfectly with fatal wounds from the person they claim they used to be, verified by autopsy reports. Now, how do you explain that?
All right, the third pillar takes us into the world of mediumship. Now, before you roll your eyes, I want you to forget everything you think you know about crystal balls or psychic hotlines. This is something else entirely. This is about putting mediums in a laboratory and testing them under the tightest scientific controls you can possibly imagine.
Just look at this protocol. It's not double-blind, it's quintuple-blind. That means 5 layers of separation. The medium doesn't know who they're reading for. The person being read for doesn't know which reading is theirs. Even the experimenters are kept in the dark. It's designed so that there's absolutely no way for information to leak through normal channels. It's got to come from somewhere else.
So what happens? Well, the results are pretty mind-blowing. Even with all these controls, certain mediums nail it. They come up with super specific stuff, a childhood nickname only the family knew, or a description of an object hidden in a drawer. The odds of them just guessing this are practically zero. The data strongly suggests they're receiving real information. Okay, pillar number 4 is a real head-scratcher for neurologists. It's called terminal lucidity. And honestly, this one phenomenon alone could make you question everything you thought you knew about how the mind and brain are related.
So, picture this. A loved one has advanced Alzheimer's. Their brain is ravaged by disease. They haven't known who you are for years. And then, just hours before they die, they wake up. They know your name, they talk about old times, they're completely back. How? How can a mind suddenly work perfectly when the brain that's supposed to create it is severely damaged?
Exactly. And that's the thing. Scientists like Dr. Michael Naum look at the brain scans and say, look, the hardware is gone. The parts of the brain needed for this just aren't there anymore. It's like that radio analogy again. Maybe the brain doesn't store our memories and personality. Maybe it just tunes into them. All right, our final pillar of evidence is maybe the most eerie of all.
Because this isn't about the person who's dying. This is about what happens to the people they leave behind, sometimes at the very moment of death. They call it a crisis apparition. So here's a classic example. A mother wakes up in the middle of the night and sees her son standing at the foot of her bed. He looks real. And at that exact same moment, hundreds of miles away, he dies in a car crash. The family won't get the official news for hours. So how did she know? This isn't just a ghost story, it's a documented pattern.
And then it gets even more intimate. There's something called a shared death experience. This is when someone sitting with a dying loved one suddenly feels like they're going with them for a moment. They see the tunnel of light, they feel that incredible peace. It's as if the barrier between two minds just melts away for a second.
So, okay, we've looked at a lot of strange stuff. What does it all add up to? The whole point here is that you can't just take one of these things and dismiss it. The real power, the real argument, comes when you see how they all seem to be pointing in the exact same direction.
Think about it. You've got near-death experiences, little kids remembering past lives, mediums getting verified information under impossible conditions, the deep medical mystery of terminal lucidity, and people sharing the experience of death. Each one on its own is weird, but together, they form a pretty compelling case for a truly radical idea, that who we are doesn't just stop when our body does.
And that's the conclusion Robert Bigelow himself came to after seeing all the evidence his foundation collected. For him, this isn't about belief anymore. He's saying, look at the data, look at the patterns. We have verifiable facts here that science, as we know it, just doesn't have an answer for, yet. Which really brings us to the final, and maybe the most important question. If all this evidence is pointing to the truth, well, that changes everything. It means death isn't an ending, but a transition. So the real question isn't whether consciousness survives. The question becomes, what are we going to do with that knowledge?